Hello everyone, and thank you for clicking on this video and hopefully watching most of it. It is always greatly appreciated. Before I get into anything else, down below you have the YouTube timeline. I split this review into various sections for your convenience. But today I'm going to be reviewing Highfleet and let you know what I found after about 40 hours of gameplay. And in case you're wondering, there is the evidence. So before I get into the review proper, I just want you to think about Highfleet as essentially like a chocolate cake. And when you slice into it, it has all these layers in it. I mean a ton of layers. Some you can see, but a lot you can't. And this can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. But we'll get into that more in a minute. And if any time you find yourself liking what I do here, or the way I talk about, or the way I think about games, don't forget to Hulk out on that sub button. Always greatly appreciated. And maybe leave a comment as well. Now in this review, I'm going to break it down into 3 sections. One is the basics of the game, what it's like when you play it, what's the sort of flow of the game, that type of thing. Then I'm going to go into what I call a gameplay examination. This is going to go over some of the good and the not so good stuff about the main parts of the game. And then at the end, I'm going to just give my overall opinion for what it is worth. In Highfleet, you take command of a fleet of, and I'm going to use the word cyberpunk airships. And you're attempting to retake a world called Gerat, or Gerat, depending on how you pronounce that first letter. You are a duke, and you are an esteemed commander, and these commanders, or these dukes or lords, are called Tarkans. And you are going to take back this world. Now, the world we assume is in the distant future, and the people of the day live in cities, separated by vast wastelands. And when you start the game off, you get, I guess, 2 main game modes. Now one is the campaign, and that's where you're going to spend almost all your time, and the other side is what they call the ship works, where you design your own ships and you can save those ships and incorporate them into your campaign and do little mini battles. But certainly almost all your time is going to be on the campaign screen, where you are looking to re-establish the empire to which you belong. Now you're always going to have to make decisions based on fuel, money, repairs and enemy movements. And as you progress forward, each city offers certain bonuses like cheap fuel, or another might offer faster repairs, or one might even be an intel hub where you can unlock the locations of enemy fleet carrier groups or even trade routes. Now each one at various times you will be seeking out a particular city for the bonuses that it offers. For example, you might be desperate for fuel, and so you're going to be looking for that city which gives you cheap fuel. Now the basics of the campaign essentially mean that you need to travel north through the city network. But it will not take long before the game takes on a cat and mouse feel as the various enemy strike groups begin to hunt for you. Now your main interface is this cyberpunk type screen, which has various knobs and buttons and indicators that control most of what goes on. And you can and will fast forward time while you're traveling between the cities, and when you do that you can, if you choose to, by the way, zoom down a little bit and get an almost satellite view of your fleet as it flies over the wasteland, which I thought was really cool. Each city needs to be taken by force. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And when you arrive at the cities, you can choose to land your craft onto the repair pads within those for quicker repairs, but it isn't mandatory. And those cities will offer you various things, and they do vary from city to city, including fuel resupply. You can rearm your vessels, you can get specialist parts for your ships, and when you're in the cities, often the campaign events unlock, or in other words, the story begins to unfold. And when that happens, you have to make various decisions that may affect the way that people view you and perhaps later help you in the game. And when you do have to fight the enemy, and this happens every single time you go to a not visited city, or when a fleet intercepts you, or you intercept a fleet, or anything like that. So when you fight, it is done on this battle screen. And when you fight the enemy, you always fight them one ship at a time. So you might have 6 or 7 ships in your fleet, but you fight one ship at a time. And when you put your first ship into the battle, you fight, and then you may wish to retreat, which is always a little exit option, or you might get destroyed. And when that happens, one way or the other, the next ship in line takes on the enemy. The enemy are always grouped together, so your odds are always stacked against you, and so it becomes quite technical to understand the real value and the real strong parts about which ships you're putting into battle, and does become some skill in how you use all that. It's actually really well done and really enjoyable. And when you do win a battle, you get to scavenge the wreckage. And in that you might find radio codes, you might find parts of a ship which you can take and sell later, or maybe even put them onto your own ships. You can scavenge fuel and various other things. So let's now move on to a closer examination of the gameplay itself. And let me just say that my first multiple efforts in the campaign ended in absolute failure relatively quickly. It was really hard to figure out what I was doing so badly wrong, and my gameplay evolved into a form of experimentation, just trying to determine what worked and what didn't. I could not figure out if the game was like a simple game and it was just screwing me over, or if there were hidden layers. And you will go through the same, so you'll have to ask yourself at some point, how much time are you going to invest in trying to uncover those hidden layers, because they are there, because the game itself is not going to help you much. Now if you like doing that, you'll be hooked, and if you don't like that, well, you may well be tempted to hit the uninstall button. But let's go over some specifics of the game. Let's start off with one of the things that really captured me, and that is the sound. The music in the game is very, very good. I tend to turn the music off when I play, just for YouTube reasons. But when you get into the game itself, the interfaces, the way the ships take off, it's a very, very tangible sound of like a fleet of craft taking off and flying through the air. It's so well done. And the battles themselves, when you're actually fighting on the screen, if you turn the sound up, even though the ships are just so small on your screen, the sound effects are just top notch. I mean, really top level stuff. I can't talk highly enough about the sounds in this game.
Fuel system is on fire. Engine overheating. Fuel system is on fire. Engine lost. Abandon ship. Evacuate the ship.
The main interface of the game, which is where you control your fleet from, has this real cyberpunk feel to it. And it is essential to know absolutely every knob and button on the screen, what it does, and when it is required to use it. The good thing is that it works really well. But the bad thing is that the basics of the game, the tutorials, etc., are really not sufficient to make you understand when you shouldn't be using certain things in the game. This screen and knowing how to work it is absolutely critical, and the game lets you down a fair bit in this space by not providing enough information on how to use it. But all said and done, it feels good, feels connected to the cyberpunk world that you're living in. I quite like it. Now, the story itself in the game and all the interactions that you have with, let's call them non-player characters, through mostly when you land in the cities and various events happen. I found when I first played through the game the first 2 or 3 times it was interesting, But because I was always having to repeat my campaign play because I was struggling to have any success, I moved rapidly to skipping past large parts of the story and really not paying too much more attention to it, because I found the various pluses and minuses I got from the various interactions really didn't mean too much to me. But maybe that was me. Some people might be a little bit more into it. The way the story pans out as a whole is quite good. The drawings are quite good. They look nice. They feel good. But I really didn't get invested into it. Now, I'd also like to talk just a little bit about the strategic aspect of the game, because to be honest, that is the core component of it. This game is really strategic. What you have to do when you play it is you have to slow your gameplay down. It's very tempting, as you've played it for 10, 12, 15 hours, to speed up your gameplay. Okay, I want to jump between this, I want to jump between that. But it is essential that you slow the game down, that you listen to what people are saying to you, you spend the time to decipher messages, you make very strategic decisions based around what's coming up, how to avoid other fleets. I found the strategy side of this game to be quite compelling. It's actually really good. This is some of those hidden layers are in the intricacies of the strategy, which when you first play the game, you don't quite see and no one really tells you about it, but the strategy is really quite deep in this game. Now, although I've mentioned it previously and I've talked about the battle screen itself and how I enjoyed it, I just want to spend a minute talking about it a bit more, because it really is enjoyable and there is quite a bit of strategy to it and skill. The first part is how you line your ships up, because they go in one at a time, and there is strategy to how you'll line your ships up and how they're going to take on the enemy, and that is super important to get that part right. And when you go into the combat, it becomes very critical that you have quite a high skill level in knowing how to use those particular ships. For example, the ones I tended to play were the fast, agile ones, and knowing how to maneuver and get around the enemy fire and get into a correct position with those ships, and knowing how to save up your ammo, changing between different ammo types. It all was very important to a successful outcome, and little ships could take out bigger ships purely based on skill. That, along with the stupendous sounds, I found the individual battles and the battle screens and the way they played out just so much fun. Now let's talk about the shipworks part of the game. And as I said, you could just mess around with the screen and come up with all sorts of wacky and weird designs, and I've seen lots of YouTubers do that, come up with these huge ships and just see how they can destroy the enemy. But really, when you are playing it properly, you're designing ships. And when you design these ships, they become available in your opening menu of the game. So after a bit of time, you can start to tweak ships to your own liking and then save them within the Shipworks system, and then they can get incorporated into your campaign. I found that particularly useful because I learned, for example, that lightning ship that I use so much, all I needed to do was stick some flares on it, and lo and behold, it became just that little bit more useful for me. It just cost a couple of $1,000 more when I had to purchase it. Little things like that where I could invest myself and develop the campaign almost to my own needs, that was really quite clever. And you shouldn't underestimate how much time you should invest into the Shipworks part of the game, because getting the right well-designed ship that you like using invested into the campaign can make all the difference to success or failure. Now lastly, my overall opinion. This game certainly has a ton of layers to it. and they are really, really good. The bad part is that you are going to have to figure an awful lot of those out for yourself, and you're going to have to do that either through watching other YouTubers or some other types of tutorials somewhere, because the game is only going to hand to you some of those answers of what those layers are in a pretty simplistic manner, and that is not going to be enough for you to be successful in this game. There is real depth and strategy to this game, and if you like that and you're willing to invest your time into discovering those strategies, then you will have a lot of fun with this game. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Don't forget I have a Twitter and a Discord. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next chapter.